Hello and welcome to section 4.1. This will be the first section of the chapter 4. Purpose of chapter 4 is to introduce you to probability theory. The vast majority of chapter 4 is going to be review. It's going to be a review of stuff that you learned back in middle school and high school. Um, there are no intra-lecture questions posted. However, there are quizzes in Moodle. So the answers for the Moodle quizzes for each of these Chapter 4 sections will be not in the lecture. Got it? You write not in the lecture for each of those, you get full credit. If you don't write it, you don't get full credit. So the objectives for section 4.1 identify the sample space of a probability event, calculate basic probabilities, determine if two events are mutually exclusive, and determine if two events are independent. Mutually exclusive and independent are two things that you're going to need to be very careful of. There's a lot of confusion between the two. If two events are mutually exclusive, then both cannot happen at the same time. If two events are independent, then having one happen doesn't affect the other. So here's some terminology. A probability experiment or a trial is a process with a result determined by chance, such as flipping a coin. Each individual result that is possible for a probability experiment is an outcome. So there are two outcomes for the coin flipping. Outcome 1 is a head, outcome 2 is a tail. The sample space is the set of all possible outcomes for any given probability experiment. Therefore, the sample space is heads and tails, or heads comma tails. An event is a subset of outcomes from a sample space. So an event could be just head. An event could be just tail. An event could be head or tail. Or an event here could be none of the above. Examples of probability experiments include flipping a coin, tossing a pair of die, drawing a raffle ticket. Those are the basics. In each of these examples, there is more than one possible result, and the result is determined at random. Example 4.1. Consider an experiment in which a coin is tossed and then a six-sided die is rolled. So A, we need to list the outcomes of the sample space for the experiment. See, coin toss, then six-sided die is rolled. Okay. List the outcomes in the event, tossing a tail, then rolling an odd number. Okay. So here are the solutions. A, each outcome consists of a coin toss and a die roll. For example, you can get a head and then a 3. We're going to denote a head followed by a 3 as H3. Using this notation, we've got 12 outcomes, 12 possible outcomes. And the set of those 12 possible outcomes is going to be the sample space. You can get a head and then a 1, a head and then a 2, a head then a 3, dot, 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 a tail, then a 5, then a tail and a 6. It's 2 times 6 possible outcomes. So the sample space is just those 12 possible outcomes. So B, we're going to choose the members of the sample space that fit the event, quote, tossing a tail, then rolling an odd number. Tossing a tail and then rolling an odd number. There's only 3 odd numbers, 1, 3, and 5. So the 3 possible outcomes of this sample space are T1, T3, T5. Next example, let's consider the experiment in which a red six-sided die and a blue six-sided die are rolled together. Use a pattern to help list the outcomes in the sample space. List the outcomes in the event. The sum of the numbers rolled on the 2 dice equals 6. Okay, many patterns that we could use. This is one that they're looking at. Why would we use a quote pattern here instead of listing all of them out? There's 36 possible outcomes. 6 for the first, 6 for the second, 6 times 6 gives us 36. Then we'd have to list out 36 outcomes for the entire sample space. Here, we can just give a pattern for what they're going to be. Or we can list them all out if we'd like to have these drawings. Notice the sample space is 1 and 1, 2 and 1, 3 and 1, 4 and 1, 5 and 1, 6 and 1, etc. If all we care about is the sum of the numbers that come up, then the sample space would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Because 2 through 12 is the sums. Now keep the sample space in mind. Note that rolling a 1 on the red die and a 2 on the blue die is different than rolling a 2 and a 1 if we care about the actual outcomes. However, if we care about just the sum, then those two are going to be identical outcomes. Part B, we're going to list the outcomes of the event. Quote, the sum of the numbers rolled on the two dice equals 6. So we're going to go back and look to see there's one here, 5, 1, 4, 2, 3, 3, 2, 4, 1, 5. Those all give us a sum of 6. So we could actually say the probability of getting a 6 when rolling two dice is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sorry, it's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 out of 36. A tree diagram can be used to represent the outcomes of an experiment, especially in the early phases when you're just trying to learn why it's 6 times 6 instead of 6 plus 6. The tree begins with the possible outcomes of the first stage and then branches for each additional possibility. We're going to see tree diagrams in the future, so it would be good to be able to write these out eventually. The number of possibilities in the bottom row of the tree is equal to the number of outcomes in the sample space. So let's consider a family with 3 children. Use a tree diagram to find the sample space for the gender of each child in regard to birth order. So again, ordering here does matter. We're doing it oldest, middle, youngest. So here it is. The first child can either be a girl or a boy. Second can be girl, boy, or girl and boy. And then girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, girl, boy. So the bottom here, GGG, would indicate that all 3 children were girls. GGB would be a girl, girl, followed by a boy. GBG would be a girl, then a boy, then a girl. Notice that this looks like a tree, especially if you turn it upside down. And so using this tree diagram as a guide, we can see that there's going to be 8 outcomes. 2 times 2 times 2. 3 children, so 2 to the power of 3. And now let's look at 3 methods for calculating the probability of an outcome. This is also usually thought of in terms of 3 ways of understanding probability. There's subjective, the experimental, and there's classical. What we've used so far is classical. What the course is going to be using in the future will be mostly experimental. Sometimes it's called frequency probability, or sometimes relative frequency probability. In a future course, subjective probability will be renamed Bayesian probability, and we'll see that subjective probability is actually the most useful of the 3. But that's for a future course way down the line. Subjective probability, according to Hawks, is simply an educated guess regarding the chance that an event will occur. This is Hawks. This is not reality, but you won't understand the reality until you get into a future stat course. And again, subjective probability or Bayesian probability will be the most useful. But we're not there yet. Experimental probability or relative frequency probability talks about using data to estimate a probability in an event. So if E is an event, then P of E, the probability that E occurs, is given by F over N, where F is the frequency and N is the total number of times the experiment is performed. So if I want to estimate or find the probability of randomly selecting a sophomore from campus, I could ask 500 people on campus if they're a sophomore, and of those 500, 295 said they are a sophomore. N would be 500, the number of people I asked, and therefore I would estimate the probability of a sophomore being 295 over 500. And that's going to be the cornerstone. This experimental probability or this relative frequency probability will be the cornerstone of the second half of the course. mainly because the classical probability very quickly indicate the classical probability very quickly will become useless. We don't know the actual probability of selecting a student who is a sophomore, so we just have to estimate it. And that estimation and the using of the estimated probabilities is this experimental probability. The benefit or the theoretical background that we can use the experimental probability is called the law of large numbers. As the sample size increases, the proportion or the means of your sample approaches the means or the proportions of the population. And then classical probability, if all outcomes are equally likely, and this is actually a very important requirement that the outcomes are equally likely, then the probability of E is equal to the number of elements in the E divided by the number of elements in the sample space. Hence, when we're talking about what's the probability of getting a 6 when rolling 2 die, and by getting a 6 I mean adding up the dice together, of getting it was just 5, the number of ways of the dice adding up to 6, divided by 36, the possible number of outcomes. Example 4 is identifying the types of probability. Determine whether each probability is subjective, experimental, or classical. Again, experimental is also referred to as relative frequency or just as frequentist. Classical is also referred to as axiomatic. AXIOM-ATIC. Probability of selecting the Queen of Spades out of a well-shuffled standard deck of cards is 1 over 52. That's clearly classical. There's only one Queen of Spades out of the 52 cards in the deck. We know this. We don't have to estimate it. We're not guessing at it. An economist predicts a 20% chance that technology stocks will decrease in value over the next year. From the information given, that will be subjective, although this economist may have used data to come up with that, in which case it would be experimental. Police officer wishes to know the probability that a driver chosen at random will be driving under the influence on a Friday night. So he records the number of drivers at a roadblock, the number of drivers drinking with blood alcohol levels over the legal limit. He determines the probability is 3%. That is very clearly a relative frequency or an experimental probability because it's based on the experiment that he performed. We just discussed that. Beck is allergic to peanuts for the next example. Poor Beck. At a large dinner party one evening, he notices that the cheesecake options on the dessert table contain the following flavors: 10 slices of chocolate, 12 slices of caramel, 12 slices of peanut butter chocolate, and 8 slices of strawberry. Assuming that the desserts are served to a guest at random, what's the probability that Beck's cheesecake contains peanuts? It's 12 divided by 10 plus 12 plus 12 plus 8. And what's the probability that Beck's dessert does not contain chocolate? That's going to be 12 plus 8 divided by 10 plus 12 plus 12 plus 8. In the first case, it's because 12 of those, the numerator 12, contain peanut butter. And in the second case, it's numerator of 12 plus 8 does not contain chocolate. However, were I Beck, I wouldn't eat cheesecake at all because even a 28% chance is not worth it. Consider a beginning archer who only manages to hit the target half the time. What's the probability that in 3 shots, the archer will hit the target all 3 times? That's going to be 1 over 8, or 12.5%. Here's why. Each time, she has a 50% chance of hitting the target. So 50% chance to hit the first time, 50 the second, 50 the third. To hit it all 3 times, it's got to hit it the first, and the second, and the third time. Here's the tree diagram. Notice in only one of these 8 cases does she hit the target all 3 times. So it's 1/8, or 12.5%. Consider a family with 6 boys. What's the probability that the 7th child will also be a boy? Okay. Families due to have a girl, but reality states just the opposite. If you've got 6 boys, it's more likely that you'll have a 7th boy. However, we're supposed to pretend that each time it's a 50% chance of getting a boy or a girl. So you got 6 boys followed by a girl, or 6 boys followed by a boy. Of these, 1 out of the 2 is a boy, so a 50% chance. Again, this assumes that the outcomes are equally likely. The reality is that if you've had 6 boys, it's more likely that you'll have a 7th boy. It's not 50% chance. And also, even on your first child, it's not a 50% chance that you'll have a boy. It's actually a less than 50% chance that you'll have a boy. It's a 49-point-something% chance. But we're simplifying things here so that because we can multiply by half very easily. In biology, we learned that many diseases are genetic. One example of such is Huntington's disease, which causes a neurological disorder as person ages. Each person has 2 Huntington genes, one inherited from each parent. If the individual inherits a mutated Huntington gene from either of his or her parents, that person will develop the disease. Notice it's from either of the parents. TV show House, the character who Dr. House calls 13, inherited the disease from her mother. So if 13 has a child with a person who has 2 healthy Huntington disease, what's the probability your child will develop Huntington's? Quite simply, the answer is going to be 1/2. Because going to get a good gene from the parent, from the father, and a bad gene from her, 50%. And that's it for section 4.1. Remember, go to Moodle, take the quiz, and for each of your answers, write something like, "This was not asked in the lecture." And that's it. Hope you all have a good day.